Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into some of the most terrifying, yet miraculous, stories from the history of aviation. These are the flights where disaster struck at 30,000 feet, and only a combination of incredible skill, sheer luck, and unbelievable calm under pressure saved the day. So buckle up, because we're about to explore 3 airline horror stories that will have you on the edge of your seat. Our first story takes us to Hawaii on April 28, 1988. Aloha Airlines Flight 243, a Boeing 737, was making a routine hop from Hilo to Honolulu. The passengers were mostly locals and tourists enjoying the beautiful island views. The flight had been smooth for about 23 minutes, reaching an altitude of 24,000 feet. Then, without any warning, a sound like a loud whoosh ripped through the cabin. What happened next was the stuff of nightmares. A massive section of the fuselage, 18-foot piece of the cabin roof, tore away from the aircraft. Suddenly, the passengers and crew were exposed to the open sky, with freezing gale-force winds whipping through what was left of the plane. It was a scene of pure chaos and terror. Imagine sitting in your seat, and then the ceiling just disappears, replaced by the blue sky and screaming wind. The decompression was explosive. One flight attendant, Clarabelle Lansing, was tragically swept out of the aircraft. 2 other flight attendants were knocked to the floor, holding on for dear life. Passengers were clinging to their seats, many injured by flying debris. The cockpit door was blown off, and the pilots could see straight back into the devastated cabin. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Schornsteimer and First Officer Madeline Mimi Tompkins were fighting for control. The plane was yawing and rolling violently. All they could hear was the deafening roar of the wind. They couldn't communicate with the cabin crew. They had to act fast. Their training kicked in, and they immediately began an emergency descent, aiming for the nearest airport on the island of Maui. The structural integrity of the plane was a complete unknown. Would the rest of the plane hold together? The pilots had to fly the aircraft slower than usual to reduce the stress on the damaged frame, but not so slow that they'd lose lift. It was a terrifying balancing act. Every second must have felt like an eternity for the 94 people on board. Miraculously, after 13 agonizing minutes that felt like a lifetime, Captain Schornsteimer and First Officer Tompkins managed to line up the crippled jet with the runway at Kahului Airport. They made an incredibly smooth landing given the circumstances. The moment the wheels touched the ground, cheers and cries of relief filled the cabin. Emergency crews were stunned by what they saw. A convertible jetliner. Despite the horrific ordeal, only 1 life was lost. The investigation later pointed to metal fatigue and corrosion, leading to major changes in aircraft maintenance and inspection regulations. The heroism of the flight crew of Aloha 243 is still legendary in the world of aviation. Next up, we traveled to the United Kingdom for a story that sounds like it was pulled straight from a Hollywood movie. On June 10, 1990, British Airways Flight 5390 took off from Birmingham, England, heading for Malaga, Spain. It was a BAC 111 aircraft, with Captain Tim Lancaster and First Officer Alistair Aitchison at the controls. About 13 minutes into the flight, as the plane climbed through 17,000 feet, the crew was preparing for meal service. Suddenly, an explosive bang echoed from the cockpit. The left windscreen panel, the one directly in front of Captain Lancaster, had blown out. The resulting explosive decompression was so powerful that it sucked Captain Lancaster halfway out of the aircraft. His legs were caught on the flight controls, but his entire upper body was outside, being battered by 300-mile-per-hour winds and temperatures of minus 17 degrees Celsius. Inside the cockpit, chaos reigned. The flight deck door was blown open, and papers and debris flew everywhere. First Officer Aitchison grabbed the controls of the violently shaking plane. At the same time, a flight attendant named Nigel Ogden, who was just about to enter the cockpit, saw what happened. His immediate instinct was to save his captain. He rushed forward and grabbed onto Lancaster's legs, holding him with all his might to prevent him from being sucked out completely. Another flight attendant, Simon Rogers, rushed in to help. He strapped himself into the captain's empty seat and assisted Ogden, who was now suffering from frostbite and exhaustion. They were holding on to their captain's life, while Aitchison was single-handedly trying to fly the plane. He initiated a rapid emergency descent and made a distress call, but the roaring wind made communication nearly impossible. From the outside, all anyone could see of the captain was his body plastered against the front of the aircraft. The crew holding on to him assumed the worst, that he was already gone. But they refused to let go, fearing his body could get sucked into an engine and cause even more catastrophic damage. First Officer Atchison, displaying unbelievable composure, managed to level the plane and get clearance to land at Southampton Airport. He made a perfect landing, with no injuries to any of the passengers. As soon as the plane stopped, emergency crews rushed to the scene. Incredibly, after being exposed to the extreme elements for over 20 minutes, Captain Tim Lancaster was alive. He suffered from frostbite, shock, and several fractures, but he made a full recovery and was back flying within 5 months. An investigation revealed that the windscreen had been fitted with the wrong size bolts during a maintenance check. The incident became a textbook example of crew resource management and the importance of every crew member's role in an emergency. Our final story is so incredible, it earned the aircraft a famous nickname, the Gimli Glider. On July 23, 1983, Air Canada Flight 143, a brand new Boeing 767, was flying from Montreal to Edmonton. The flight was cruising at 41,000 feet over Red Lake, Ontario, when suddenly a warning chime sounded in the cockpit. It was a fuel pressure problem. Captain Bob Pearson and First Officer Maurice Quintel initially thought a fuel pump had failed, but then a second warning chime went off for the other engine. Soon after, the unthinkable happened. The left engine flamed out. The crew began preparing for a one-engine landing. As they were diverting to Winnipeg, the master warning alarm blared through the cockpit. This time, it was the sound no pilot ever wants to hear, the sound of the second engine failing. The giant Boeing 767 had just become a 132-ton glider. With both engines out, the aircraft lost all its main electrical power. Most of the advanced instruments in the glass cockpit went dark. Only a few basic battery-powered backup instruments were still working. The situation was dire. The plane was descending rapidly, and they were too far from Winnipeg to make it. They were falling out of the sky. Here's where the story gets even crazier. Why did a brand new plane run out of fuel mid-flight? All came down to a simple but critical mistake. Canada was in the process of converting from the imperial system to the metric system. The new 767's fuel was calculated in kilograms, but the ground crew had mistakenly used the conversion factor for pounds. As a result, the plane had taken off with less than half the fuel it needed. Back in the silent cockpit, Captain Pearson, an experienced glider pilot, was using his skills to control the massive, unpowered jet. First Officer Quintel frantically searched for a nearby landing strip. He remembered a former Royal Canadian Air Force base at Gimli. He knew the area. What he didn't know was that the airbase had been converted into a public airport and, more importantly, part of one of the runways was now a drag racing strip. On that very day, it was hosting a race day for a local motorsports club. As the silent 767 descended towards Gimli, the families and racers on the ground looked up in disbelief, seeing a massive jetliner approaching without a sound. They had no warning. People scattered as the plane got closer. Captain Pearson, using a maneuver called a side slip to lose altitude without gaining too much speed, a technique rarely used in commercial jets, lined the plane up with the runway. The landing gear failed to lock properly due to the lack of hydraulic pressure, and the nose gear collapsed upon landing. The plane scraped down the runway on its nose, showering sparks, narrowly missing the crowds and race cars, but it came to a stop. Against all odds, all 61 passengers and 8 crew members survived. A few sustained minor injuries during the emergency evacuation, but it was a miraculous outcome. The plane was repaired and flew for another 25 years, forever known as the Gimli Glider. This incident highlighted the critical importance of procedural checks and the astonishing skill of pilots, turning a potential catastrophe into a legendary tale of survival. These stories are a testament to the incredible resilience of both humans and machines. They show how training, quick thinking, and a little bit of luck can overcome even the most terrifying situations. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through aviation history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. Fly safe, and I'll see you in the next one.